What is a tree? It seems such an obvious question we shouldn't even bother answering it. You know, it's one of those things you might say while pointing to, well, what we would call a tree. If you were pressed, maybe you'd say something like, a tree is a tall plant with bark and leaves. You might even pull at the heartstrings and say, the behemoths you climbed as a kid until you went as high as you could go or you could dare, and for a little while you would sit on the bough as it swayed in the breeze, and you would look out with wonder at the world transformed by the vantage. You might talk about those beings that surprise you in spring with purples and whites, that are giant and green all summer and that turn red and orange and yellow in the fall, before being reduced to skeletons all winter. Except, of course, for evergreens, which you might bring inside during the cold months to decorate and place presents under. That last part depends greatly on where you live. I grew up in the United States, and so that's how I know trees, but maybe you grew up differently. Maybe for you, trees are green all year round and form this mighty canopy that keeps torrential rains a little lighter for those underneath. Or maybe the word tree means those horizontal arms of the acacia as it struggles against the heat. But this is all a little dreamy, right? Surely by now, in our age of firm, confident, scientific knowledge that must extend its bright beams of enlightenment into just about every nook and cranny of this once dark universe, surely by now we have a firm definition of trees, something from a respectable discipline like botany. Well, when you ask botanists, things get even a little more dreamy. See, what we would point to and call trees aren't all from the same common ancestor. I mean, eventually, obviously, yes. I mean, everything has a common ancestor at some point, theoretically. But many species have independently become tree-like. It's something that keeps happening. There wasn't a single species that became a tree and then split off into all the other species of trees. No. There was a plant that became a tree. And then another one figured out a similar way to live. And then another, and so on. Some of these went on to split off into other kinds of trees. Sure, I'll grant you that. But there is something mysterious to me that so many plants independently became trees. A tree, then, is a strategy for surviving. Set down roots and grow as tall as you can. Oh, and you'll need some strong outer coating if you're going to be so big in one place for so long. Looking at it this way, a tree is sort of a shape plants tend to take when left to their own devices. It's an implied pathway that the local conditions of planet Earth have set out for some reason, either by chance or design or the weird fractal plan at the heart of the structure of nature that is both chance and design all in one. What is a tree? The answer is so obvious, is such a bedrock part of how I understand the world, that its actual non-obviousness is captivating, terrifying. If I woke up stranded, suffering amnesia, confused and disoriented and afraid, I think if I saw a tree, something would click. I would say a tree, and I would be less lost, less scared, less alone. I would have an anchor. At least this one thing would make sense. That's something that feels a little firmer than a biological strategy or a collection of related memories. When I say the word tree, I make the place I find myself a little less unknown. I resolve this blurry cloud of form and movement, if only in part, and if only for a time, into something I feel like I understand. Ah, a tree. Would you look at that? Tree is a story I tell about the world. And by telling myself that story, I've made a friend where there was only a continuous flow of different features. I mean, the idea of a tree unites all of these qualities, hard and rough in places, bendy in others, bursting with sugar water in its fruit, opening up petals in its flowers, fingering into the soil, and that's not even counting all the ways a leaf can look, papery, plasticky, pointy. Tree is a story that makes meaning of all this. It tells me that this is a tree, and since I've known trees, I'll probably get along with this one, more or less the same. Trees I've sat under for shade to read a book. Trees I've touched and gotten sap all over my fingers, which became a little crisis for the day. Trees I've wept for when a storm took them down. If I tell you there's a tree and you've known trees, now both of our brains are firing together, and maybe there's some overlap between what's going on inside us. If I say tree, then a little part of the universe has meaning for me, for you, and, crucially, for us. And yes, many philosophers throughout time, not to mention just many people in general, have noticed that meaning is something we produce. Karl Marx described how institutions like religion and legal order, what he called the superstructure, produce the meaning that undergirds the economic system of the day, what he called the base. Antonio Gramsci later expounded on this, but he went further. He described how the ruling class can use cultural institutions to influence the worldview and ideology of the masses, things like music on the radio or the television, nowadays streaming services of various and sundry kinds. Jean-Paul Sartre reminded us that we need to get to work making meaning for ourselves because there was none to be found in objective reality, or so the argument goes. Many others have come and said how meaning is produced, either as a byproduct of language, or the structure of the right hemisphere of the brain, or whatever else. But I think it's just way, way further down than that. With a tree, meaning begins with me, a person, or we could say a subject, encountering the other. And in this encounter, we begin to relate. I meet the tree, and the tree meets me. I, the hairless little primate, and the tree, that swaying silent giant. We begin to relate, and out of that relationship comes meaning. And for me, this touches into a deep secret of existence. In Christianity, the idea of God as a Trinity places a being called the Father, considering the beloved other called the Son, in a relationship of love called the Holy Spirit. It is out of this core relationship between self and other, who are always inexplicably also united as one and the same, that produces not just meaning but all that is, was, and ever shall be, world without end. This idea of consciousness, considering itself and being in relation as the core principle of being, appears in many other places around the world, especially in many varieties of Hinduism, either as a god and a goddess, or as Kundalini, being consciousness bending back in on itself. And back to trees. More literally, they have served as the site of the sacred. Western historians note the prevalence of pagans treating individual trees as the embodiment of gods and local spirits. Venerate the tree, venerate the deity. The motif of the world tree appears everywhere from Europe to Siberia to ancient America. The world tree has its roots down in the underworld, its trunk piercing up through the middle world of our lives and spreading its branches out to hold up the sky. This world tree is the axis mundi, the center of existence, but also the ladder from the depths up to heaven itself. The connection to trees has this mystical and mythological quality that we cannot deny, but it is also intimate in the everyday operating of life itself. In 1964, Shel Silverstein released his children's picture book classic, The Giving Tree. It was a well-worn work in the home I grew up in. The story tells of a boy who spends his days playing in a tree that lovingly gives him apples and branches to swing from. As the boy becomes a teenager, the tree gives him extra apples to sell for money. As a young man, the tree gives him branches to build a house. As a middle-aged man ready to venture to far-off lands, the tree even allows him to chop down to the stump and use the trunk for a boat. Finally, the boy returns from his adventures, now an old man. But the tree has nothing left to give him. Yet the old man, having lived his life, simply would like a place to sit and rest, and the tree, now a stump, gives him even that. It's a heartbreaking book where we see the tree constantly giving and the boy constantly taking without gratitude or giving back. When I read the book as a child, I kept yelling at the pages for the boy to wake up to his exploitation of this caring, loving tree. I kept rereading, hoping this time he would see the tree as worthy of consideration and mutual respect. And then I grew up, and I started living my own life. Right now, I'm speaking in a room paneled by pine tree wood. I spend many autumn evenings outside around a fire, and just like the boy, I eat apples. I am also a human in the 21st century, a time where my species is entering an all-out effort to take back all the carbon we've been releasing into the air for the past couple hundred years. In this fight, many breakthrough technologies are being deployed. But for all our technical advancement, trees remain the best way to clean the air, cool cities, and even fight desertification. For instance, the Great Green Wall has planted something like 66 billion trees since 1978 in an effort to slow the growth of deserts in the north of China. And there's another Great Green Wall being planted in Africa. A 2024 study showed that trees can lower urban temperatures by as much as 21 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius, given the right conditions, obviously. All the while, having more trees around makes human life feel better. And that's not even the first time trees have come to our rescue. Think of the countless generations of humans spanning millennia who relied on the warmth and safety and cooking abilities of fire. Humans are in a deep relationship with trees. Our fate continues to be tied to them. So, how does this concept, this word tree, have any meaning? How could it not? A few years ago, I was hiking and came across a tree and wrote a poem that I'd like to share. It's called Hello Tree. From your one trunk comes two great columns, raising their leafy arms up to catch these first yellow gifts of the sun. I want to be like you, spending all day praising the sky. And while you worship, you give stage to countless plays, a leaping squirrel, a nesting bird, a chirping frog, and below you, the meadow waxes and wanes each year. You are the knower of the field. You are the day's teacher. That poem captures the seeing I had that day that I want to end on. A tree, by lifting its arms to the sky, reminds me of joyful prayer. And prayer is ultimately being in intentional relationship with God, that absolute mystery of a word. I mean, if you thought tree was hard to define, try God. But the tree prays in such a magnificent way. By simply being a tree, it knows how to effortlessly align with what is. Treehood is like Buddhahood for plants, maybe. Maybe that's why plants keep independently becoming trees. They attain enlightenment and then just shoot up towards the heavens. This form of prayer, this unclenched relating to being itself, is also what allows it to be of so much service to others. As we've seen, they give and give and give to us. But who do they not give to? There are so many species of plant and bird and bug and reptile and amphibian and mammal and fungus and bacteria that benefit from trees. And as we learn more about the fungal network hidden in the soil, we are finding that they even send messages to each other in the mycorrhizal network. And this helps them prepare for coming forest fires and voracious herbivores and pathogens. They even do this across species. The prayer of trees is the alignment to their shape, the part of the geometry of being here made by chance and design, is the alignment to that tree strategy their ancestors took one day long ago. Just by doing that, they serve the greater purpose. They give. It isn't that they give because they are exploited, although they are exploited. They give because they are here, being tree and doing tree. That makes other shapes, other ways of being possible. These mutually reinforcing ways of being support one another. The meaning of tree is produced from a process of these different ways of being, relating to tree and becoming through that relationship. And the meaning of tree to a squirrel might be very different than the meaning of tree to me, but both are producing the fullness of tree. What is a tree? The nature of reality as relating, and how this relating gives rise to meaning, and how this meaning makes everything, how this meaning is inescapable. How its roots reach down into the soil made of composting bodies and the dark mysteries of death. How its trunk heroically surges upward because it knows no other way. How its branches like arms and its leaves like fingers grasp for the heavens in a lifelong prayer. How all this glory can become a home for others. Which is to say, one of these things.